Manesi mama vorkta ja barakito totoskita. Minana vorkta ja mama barakta ja imana to umprtikita ja barakta. Ma are era umprkiata. So I don't always know what dialect it is that's coming through when I bring it in.
Oh, so you don't know what you're speaking?
No, I don't know what I'm saying. I speak it through my heart.
It's not consciously made?
I think the art becomes its own sort of consciousness in a way. I'm very much affected by cosmic energies that come in and like full moons and I no longer see myself as strictly like an artist trying to like make it in the art world. I see myself more as a healer or a guide, and I bring in different codes and I embed them in the artwork, and it's for specific like messaging for people to see. So what I love about the water-based paint is the immediacy of it, being able to access some multidimensional realms and these different aspects of myself that are outside of what, you know, the three-dimensional you can see around you has played a part in understanding myself as a whole. I have this intuitive way of existing at this point where I have almost like an urgency or a need to be painting.
What do you think is art?
When I'm making art, it's like every single sort of molecule is precious. Every bit of the process is imbued with a connection to my eternal self. The understanding is through the heart, is through the soul, is through existence. It's not necessarily the logical mind or the ego-centered mind.
If we do so much abstract and so much ready-mades in this world, then would it differ much from like a caveman painting? And if it doesn't differ, do you think that is a good thing?
I'm a true romantic when it comes to art. Like I see it as a calling. I don't see it as like, I see it as something where you don't have a choice. I'm all about freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of, an ability to paint, perceive, emulate anything you want with utter freedom. My name's Tammi Meehan. Yeah.
I'm so perplexed.
Yep. It's a perplexing thing. But I've been doing it for 6 years. So it's not something that's like, I have a inner light channel on YouTube, and that is, part of it started, I can show you this piece here. So this piece I channeled 6 years ago, and it's embedded with light codes. And this I channeled for myself, for my past self, to help me with my direction in my life for the next few years. So this is what I do for people now. I make artwork specifically for them, for their soul purpose, and I bring in specific codes, light codes, either spoken light codes or channeled visual codes to help people on their journey so that they can be more in alignment with what their soul is asking them to be in alignment with.
Doing this, do you have interactions with death?
With death? Not, that's a whole very loaded thing. I mean, I've had near-death experiences. I was hit by a car as a pedestrian in 2009. And I've been in a lot of different accidents. And I was my ability to connect with clairaudience, that psychic ability started over 5 years ago. So, but that's within the realm of like different dimensions, and without going like into that, there's, psychics, tap into the field in a very similar way. So it's all there. It's all in the quantum field. It's just a matter of like pulling it in and learning the skills to be able to embody it. So.
Can you feel your soul?
Well, I think everybody can if you're kind of in alignment, Yeah, it's a whole like it's pretty new, right? It's a whole new sort of this quantum healing. This is what I can bring in as an aspect of quantum healing, but this is where we're headed with science and everything. There's a lot of science that backs up a lot of like what I do and what other healers do. It's, you know, I don't know if you've heard of Reiki, but it's a very similar idea where you're channeling from like a central column of light. You're bringing in source light energy and you're working with that. It's all to help people. It's all to help clear their shadow aspects, to clear whatever densities are blocking them on their journey, their ascension journey, their journey to be part of a larger collective of people who are interconnected through a sense of unconditional love and acceptance. You know, and I love that, like, your generation, younger generations, they get it like instantaneously. You know, it's like, oh yeah, Age of Aquarius, we're here. There's more people that are like my generation and older. They don't quite understand it. They don't get it. They don't really want to because it doesn't fit into like a logical explanation. But it's time. That one there. All of these start the same way. All of them, all of these pieces were all channeled while I was in Sedona. So like this one is more, this and these two are kind of looking directly at, I think it was Cathedral Rock that we could see from the Airbnb. And then these codes came in. I work with the codes as I work with the painting sometimes. Sometimes there's the, you know, on the first layer, and then other stuff comes through. And I don't always know exactly what, it wasn't until like last week that I was told that these are landing codes. I'm like, oh, okay, what does that mean? So, you know, I work with it as it comes through, but I have, I'm not attached to a specific linear timeline for the work. So, you know, I could look at this a year from now and some new information could come through just from looking at the art. And then like this was started as the idea had to do with like trees and petals and stuff, but then like the petals turned into eyes, and then there's sort of like these quote alien like star being forms in there. You know, I was in Sedona, so it's like, you know, we did look for UFOs and stuff like that and saw some. And
so your art isn't conscious.
It isn't conscious?
It's not consciously made?
I think the art becomes its own sort of consciousness in a way. So it's tapping into other consciousnesses or the field, the quantum field, and it brings through what needs to come through as far as, you know, colors and specific forms and specific sort of almost like literature with the light codes that are embedded within it.
Can you talk about your work?
So the work that just came down, I just had a show called Union that was up. It was kind of a culmination of work from the past 6 years. And that was almost like a mapping out of what turned into what could only really be described as a spiritual awakening that occurred for me back in 2020. This happened to a lot of people, a lot of artists. I'm sure you've heard about this. It's kind of like this collective sort of movement. And so I had what's called a Kundalini awakening. And at the time, I had no idea what was going on and didn't have a lot of access to resources as far as like help. But there were a few things that I did to help. One was I started meditating every day for a half an hour a day at least, sometimes twice a day for a half an hour. So I did silent meditations. Another was to meet with different mentors and spiritual advisor type people. Another was to take Kundalini yoga and start getting into more of a Bhakti path. And when I met with a spiritual mentor, Christina Lopes, she's a heart alchemist, one of the suggestions she made was to really just kind of lean into my yin energy. So having been sort of socialized in like a yang dominant world, what would it feel like to sit in contemplation and actually feel into like different emotions and stuff like that? So her advice was to just work, to make art as much as possible. So I started, during lockdown, I started working with mostly watercolors because they're so immediate. and because I couldn't really get to my studio that often, um, and I started working with my non-dominant hand just to kind of like play. And at that time, some of the things that started coming in was my ability, some of my abilities to channel started coming online. So I started pulling in some sort of like random scrolling with my non-dominant hand. And then I met with a galactic shaman, and I was attuned so that more light language could come in. So it's about 6 years ago that I started being able to channel light language, but it hasn't been something that I brought to the fore with my artwork. And so this show that I just had, Union, was kind of about this sort of like separation from the self, a rejection of the self, but then kind of a coming together, because I think that we were physically separated from each other during that time. And there was a sort of, I was interested in the energy between. I have a piece that's out in the hallway. It's called Cell Song, and it was I was just kind of exploring and the idea of, how do cells communicate when they're like lined up next to each other? How does that even happen? How does that occur? So the spiritual practice that was becoming fortified 6 years ago was kind of running parallel to my art making practice. And so in the show, you can kind of see that. And then the culmination toward the end is almost like the main piece at the end is called oosphere, which is just a kind of fancy name for ovum, or like a fertilized egg. And there's a piece that looks kind of like an ultrasound. And then there's oosphere. So it's almost like a rebirth that occurs with this sort of merging of the male and female energies within the self. So that's what that show is about. And it also was kind of a way of starting to bring in this expression that can be seen as separate. That, I have, when I was showing in New York, I had a piece called Music that had like codes embedded in it. People would ask me, well, what is that? And it's kind of hard to explain because a lot of people kind of think it's, kind of out there. So, yeah. So my practice now has changed quite a bit because I no longer see myself as strictly like an artist trying to like make it in the art world. I see myself more as a healer or a guide, and I bring in different codes and I embed them in the artwork, and it's for specific like messaging for people to see.
Can you talk about some of the influences of artists on you?
Sure. Well, I started drawing, in kindergarten. I started drawing as like a 3-year-old. And I went to art school. I went to Parsons School of Design and then transferred to Mass Art. And then I went to school in Paris for a year and then transferred back to Mass Art. And, it's funny because I feel like you have different influences throughout your life. As a young artist, I was very much influenced by the French school. And as I sort of matured, I would say, like in art school, very much influenced by Philip Guston. Absolutely love Philip Guston, still love Philip Guston. But as I've evolved as an artist, I mean, back then I was doing some work that would be considered sort of radical feminist, but it wasn't work that could necessarily get shown. For various reasons, which is part of the reason why I brought this sketchbook that has collages from like 20 years ago. I had that as part of this Union show as a kind of like way to sort of integrate that aspect that never really was able to shine back then. So I would say more recently, some of my sort of favorite artists would be Hilma of Klint, of course. Leonora Carrington. I love a lot of surrealist artists. and more mystical artists that have that sort of, but then like really classic, minimal, beautiful work like Brancusi and, Rothko. There's something so magical and spiritual about his work. Those are just artists that kind of come to mind right now. Louise Bourgeois, Judy Chicago, some female artists that kind of were kind of in obscurity for a long time, and then were kind of revealed to the art world later as being important. So.
Can you shed some light into your identity as a female, as artist?
I'm a middle-aged woman now, so it's because you can't, everything is so subjective, and I love that. Like I love that now, like in the art world, it's all about this subjective experience of, who you are as a human. Great, but 35 years ago, I got awards for, being the best in the state and stuff like that. But it just didn't really matter, because even going to art school where 85% of the population is female, more than half of the monetary awards went to males. So how can I even express, you know what I mean? Like you have to have lived it to understand and then there was also the AIDS crisis that a lot of kids these days, artists these days, don't really understand what happened with the art world during that time and how devastating it was. And that definitely had a role in shaping my work as an artist at a young age. So it's, and I feel like the female experience is just, it's just like, it's a very subjective experience. Yeah, that's something that I would have to like really kind of contemplate and sort of come back to. I feel like now it's not as relevant to me. I know that, with my bhakti practice and just what I've learned on the yogic path, being female is important as far as being able to hold a lot of positive energy and being able to emote that or emit that. I feel like I can be very helpful in my general practice, like as a human being, and putting things out there just because, people feel comfortable with me, having that sort of feminine presence. I think people tend to like feel more safe and open up to me. But I've also done a lot of trauma work with other people, but also on myself. And so that can play a role, and that can actually, the art piece can be really helpful for a lot of people in another avenue for processing.
Can you separate your identity as an artist and your identity as an individual?
No. I tend to, I see things holistically, and so it's part of who I am, but I'm also like a bunch of other things as well. And I don't view things kind of top down or hierarchical in any way, like this or that. It's more like this and now. I see things in a much more expanded way. So like and we're like, we're in the age of Aquarius now, so it's like anything's possible. So it's kind of like, and I also think that having the experience of being able to access some multidimensional realms and these different aspects of myself that are outside of what, the three-dimensional you can see around you, has played a part in understanding myself as a whole, and that the artist piece is an aspect and also a means, a way of bringing to light what needs to come through me and be seen. But speaking of that, so my show that just ended, Union, was up for 6 weeks in Dartmouth at a gallery in Dartmouth, and I will be having another solo show coming up at the Frederick Douglass Gallery at Gallery X in November, and that show is very much influenced by the Radiant Sutras. This is a translation by Lauren Roach, who actually he just passed away, and it is of the Bhairava Tantra. And this is a conversation between Shakti and Shiva that has been translated many times, but this translation is absolutely beautiful. I'm actually studying Sanskrit right now with a couple of women from the UK. One is a Sanskrit scholar in Cambridge, and the other is a shaman, and she's a Tantra practitioner and Kundalini practitioner. So it's been really fascinating to kind of dig into this practice, and it's had a really positive influence on what I'm bringing through in my work, because I've been very interested in energetics and sort of like energy between people, energy within like our arc lines. And it's a beautiful book that I recommend to everybody. It can really kind of add to your meditation practice, and I've found it very helpful.
How do you think literature, art, and visual arts differs?
I think it's just a different understanding. It's a different type of understanding. I don't think that there's a huge difference. I curated a show a couple of years ago at Groundworks Gallery, and it was called Elemental. And what I wrote about it had to do with this sort of fifth element, which is in the ether, basically. And this idea that artists and writers alike, that we sort of like channel in, or it's a shamanistic type of work that we do, and it's kind of like tapping into a field of, the quantum field, and tapping into sort of like the unknown and pulling in, and so I think that a lot of artists would agree, and creative writers would agree, that sometimes it's almost like you're just the conduit, that you're not actually, it's not about you, it's about bringing through something, bringing through a vision, bringing through an understanding, bringing through specific words in specific ways. So I don't actually see too much difference, other than just the tactile quality of what it is, the experience as a human, seeing something on the two-dimensional surface versus, hearing something, picking up on information in different ways, because we have so many different ways that we communicate with each other.
Can you talk about your expression a bit more?
It has kind of evolved from being something that was more pictorial or illustrative. And it's actually, it's kind of just as illustrative right now, but my approach is very different. My approach is much more intuitive, and I used to be a lot more, I guess it just depends on what project I'm working on, because there is the direct channeling that I do, and then I work with people and we talk about like what their goals are and stuff, and I will bring in light codes specifically designed for them to assist them on their ascension journeys. So there's that aspect of my work that I do. And then there's the studio work, which is really not that different. It just depends on the piece. So I have a few pieces on the wall right now that are works in progress that they have to sit, because there's a sort of immediacy that I like to feel that I can bring through on the canvas. And so I kind of almost wait for the canvas to sort of speak to me about what the next step is. It's very intuitive. I have a large piece, the oosphere that I referred to earlier. That was mostly just an intuitive feeling into what I needed to do next. When I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I just started playing, and then what came through came through. But some of these other pieces, I have this sort of intuitive way of existing at this point, where I have almost like an urgency or a need to be painting, and then I will bring in. So that's why I also work in water-based paints as well as oil paints, because the oil paints you can kind of, I want to say, well, that's more of like a passion to work with oil paints, and I just like the light in oil paints, and then the immediacy of the water-based paints works really well for when I'm bringing in light codes, or I have transmissions that need to be expressed on the two-dimensional surface and brought through, and then I'll post them on my I have YouTube accounts and social media that I'll put through some of the stuff. So I have, there's other people around the planet that also channel light codes, and so I have sort of this network of people that get it, that understand that there's not like there's not the understanding is through the heart, is through the soul, is through existence. It's not necessarily the logical mind or the ego-centered mind. So you have to shift out of that in order to be able to see it and feel it and absorb sort of like the gift of it. So I work in a lot of different ways. There's not one specific logical practice that I, every day come into the studio at the same time and set up and do. It doesn't work like that for me at all, because I'm a human and I see things as constantly moving. And, you never know from day to day. And I'm very much affected by cosmic energies that come in, and like full moons. And so sometimes I'll work with whatever energies are going on right in the moment, whatever messages that need to come through. And then there are other pieces that are more long term that, I have this idea about a sculpture that I'm, reaching out to different other artists to kind of brainstorm on how I can bring this into form for the specific show that's in the future. And so that too, there's a little bit more like marinating and waiting, and it's also a very intuitive thing to just kind of like, and then have that sort of right timing to put it all together. So it just depends on like what's going on, I guess.
What do you think is art?
That's such a loaded question. It's changeable. I think that art is something that is it's a subjective experience for each person. I think my personal idea of what art is has changed a lot over the years. However, if I it's kind of hard to pinpoint. I can't help but go back to basics for myself when you ask a question like that. And I think about, feeling really enthralled watching these PBS specials of Bill Moyers interviewing Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces, as well as a lot of other. So he was, I think, sociology professor, and he taught about all the cultures all around the world. It was very fascinating. And the time when he was teaching, it was a really important time for people just generally just to learn. It was a lot of expanding that was happening, not as quickly as it happens now, because we have so much easy access to a lot of information. So, and he coined the term "follow your bliss," and his sort of like instructions for life were basically like, follow your bliss and everything will kind of fall into place. Like you'll meet the right people at the right timing who will show you, which direction you need to go to next. And what I love about what he brought in for information was this sort of the layers of commonality between humanity. So he would bring in religious practices, Native American practices, Hindu practices, all these different practices. But, what was common throughout all, this thread that was common throughout all. And I think what is missing from like the modern art experience of looking at art, what is missing is the mystical experience. But and so when I think of art, I kind of dive in. I do this whole deep dive because I studied art history in school, and I studied art history in Paris and France and French, and I did a lot, but that was all like Western art, but seeing the caves this past September and visiting Lascaux and visiting some of these other prehistoric caves, the experience of viewing that art, which is this like, pictographic sort of signs, for lack of a better term, of this like early human first art, you feel the reverence for the earth, for animals, for you're in a cave, you're in this confined space, but there's something about it that's very you're held, you're almost like in this sort of womb like atmosphere, and it's safe. And so yeah, that's such a loaded question, because then you could easily segue from there into stained glass windows in cathedrals, and people not being able to knowing how to read, and them being taught stories through pictures, and taught how to read through pictures. So it just depends, because art is no longer this two-dimensional thing. Art is performance, art is dance, art is the experience of creating, the process of art. That's also an art, So it's like this discernment where there's the art and then there's the skill within the art, which is also art, So it's such a massive umbrella term. It's like, what's trauma? Well, like, let me, or what's PTSD? And then you've got all the different, So, yeah, I feel that for me personally, I think it's important now in my life to honor what I have created for myself and the wisdom that I've acquired. And a lot of the wisdom doesn't just come from me, it's acquired from other teachers, mentors, gurus. And that now I have a responsibility to sort of embody that. And so when I'm making art, it's it's like every single sort of molecule is precious. Every single moment matters. Every bit of the process is sort of imbued with a connection to my eternal self, my what is connected to source light energy. So, with that being said, I could even, you can make that jump to like God or the universal force or whatever you want to call it. But I really love this idea that's borrowed from Hinduism that actually I recently came across on my feed about, it was like from Joseph Campbell Foundation. And it was about how we're all gems, and that we're all like this net of gems. We're just kind of shining out, reflecting upon each other. So just like that experience of being human, and like, this is what I bring to my experience of being human. And then, your art could potentially be, pulling together the videos and bringing that out. That's your art, So it's, could almost even call it just a way of living too.
Do you think we're going back to caveman art?
I think we should. I think with AI and with our
But with
people's abilities to like not discern, not be able to discern what is truly like derived from the hand of man versus like what is, computer generated, I think that that's going to be really important moving forward. I think that there are objects that have ontological significance that you can just feel, like if I'm driving down the highway, because we're all changing. That's kind of, these are like, there's nothing that I speak of is new information, but we're all changing. Planet Earth, Gaia is ascending. The frequency is changing on the planet with the Schumann resonance and with some of the frequencies we're all kind of collectively meant to raise our frequencies and meant to be more in the Aquarian age, which is unconditional love. And so I think that discernment is key for your health, for yourself, for your own body. And I think when it comes to art that's generated by non-human hands, that's a subjective thing of whether or not you actually like it. But I know from personal experiences, having met people who have been abductees and have had conversations like with star beings, that star beings prefer work that's done by hand, by human hands. And I think that like we're kind of headed into this age of disclosure with like this Steven Spielberg film that's coming up and everything. And it's my understanding that that they love that work by hand and music that's human generated, not AI generated. So I don't know if that's answers the question at all.
I mean, like, if we do so much abstract and so much ready-mades in this world, then would it differ much from like a caveman painting? And if it doesn't differ, do you think that is a good thing?
Well, I mean, I would actually even challenge your statement because I don't know, like, I do not see enough art out in the world, honestly. Like, if I go to people's houses or like let's say I don't have a dog anymore, but when I used to walk the dog around the neighborhood at night, can't help it, I'm gonna peek. I'm gonna see like people have their windows open or whatever. There's no art on the walls. So until there's a point where people are actually like buying art, real art, or even fake generated whatever art, until there's a point where like everybody actually has art to look at their house, in their living rooms, in their bedrooms, in their living quarters, then it's an interesting question, but I don't think that there are enough people out there who are actually purchasing art, especially not like directly from the artist. I don't think there's enough interest. I think people like are afraid to buy art. I think that they're afraid that like if they actually buy something that they like, what if so and so doesn't like it? What are people gonna think of me if I put this on my wall? I think that there's a lot that's kind of absurd actually, like if you like it, you like it. So
But is art ever directed to the normal class? Isn't it always like a toy from the elite?
I had a really great conversation or argument with somebody like 20 years ago about something very similar. Um, yeah, it doesn't have to be, I think it's accessible to everybody. And I think too, like when I bring it into like a therapy session, it's a really great tool for sort of like normalizing the space, like becoming the same as. And I think people who teach art notice that too, that like when you start getting into sort of like the zen of creating, everybody's the same, you know. But I mean, that's kind of like also the fallout from the whole hierarchical system, I think things are changing moving forward. I think that there are, but I mean, it just, ebbs and flows just like everything else.
Why do you think some art are valued higher than others?
I think it's just who you know. I think it's just who you know, who's hot, who's, getting reviewed by the right people at the right time. Um, I think that it's just,
So you're saying a normal person can never become an artist?
there's always a potential. I mean, I have a friend who's doing a contest right now who was told that she didn't have a chance at all, and now she's like sixth in her category. It's like a nationwide thing. So you just don't, that's what's kind of fun about the whole art thing, is that it's for anybody.
Should artists follow particular trends in order to make themselves successful?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's a choice. It's a choice. But you can, and great, good for you. That's wonderful. But I don't believe that that's the purpose of, it's, for me, like, I'm a true romantic when it comes to art. Like, I see it as a calling. I don't see it as, like, I see it as something where you don't have a choice. So even when I was going to graduate school and getting a master's in education, I'm still making time out to make sure that I have time to also be making art, because I know that I need to do that in order to be tapping into that expressive part of myself, to be in that energy. So it's a relief, it's kind of like a soul purpose. But you can imitate anything. And so, yeah, I mean, if it works, if you get 5 million views, great, fantastic. I'm happy for you. That's great. That's a different type of abundance than, like, what's important to me personally. That's a different type of fame, or I at the end of the day, I'm all about freedom of thought, freedom of an ability to paint, perceive, emulate anything you want with utter freedom. If you're not feeling comfortable in a space with me, if you're not feeling like, you know, you can be yourself, truly authentic within yourself, then I'm doing something wrong. So I believe in authenticity, and tapping into that aspect of yourself that is a soul resonance, that is truly only yours. Because we're all here for a reason. We all have different resonances. We all have, preferences, and we're all here to, like, learn